Hey there, everyone. I'm back again this quarter with Peter, and together we're going to share a few mystical insights for the next few months, the quarter ahead, April, May, June, as we get a little further into 2023. Peter, of course, is going to chime in with some really thoughtful tarot insights about this part of the year, and I'll be sharing a few little astrological cycles and things to keep in mind for the next few months. And speaking of that time frame, so we're looking at April, May, June of 2023. When I sat down to prep this, I realized that this is a really special and unique and kind of important part of 2023 as a whole. And that's because this is the time frame where we're experiencing the brand new transit of Pluto into Aquarius. So technically speaking, Pluto came into Aquarius at the end of March, around March 23, or will be going in on March 23 if you happen to be watching this before then. And Pluto will be in Aquarius for just a few months until around the 11th of June. And so this is a preview period. It's sort of a very early activation for a longer cycle that is going to shape the next 2 decades, the next 20 years of all of our lives. We'll be settling into that cycle more permanently in 2024. And so this few months, April, May, June of 2023 is a chance to really just pay attention and observe the new things that are starting to call your attention, but also acknowledge the projects, the endeavors, or even the chapters in your life that might be winding down and coming to a conclusion. Pluto in Aquarius is all about the air element. And so it's about human intellect. It can be about scientific and technological progress, and the pros and cons of that, with things like AI and VR, as we integrate more in that electronic online space, what's good about that and perhaps what's bad about that. And so we don't have to have full understanding of everything in this next 3 months, and we don't have to fix all the problems in the next 3 months, but we want to pay attention to the kinds of issues and topics that are going to require some really thoughtful, deep reflection and review in the years to come. So just to kind of set us up that this 3-month period, April, May, June of 2023 is really unique. It's different from the rest of the year. And it is the first time in more than 200 years that we're experiencing Pluto in Aquarius together. So that's a little bit just overview of this quarter. And Peter, I think you're going to take us right into April and give us a tarot insight for April of 23.
I am. It's funny you mentioned the idea of a 200-year cycle, because this time around, I thought I would play a little bit with tarot, because tarot is different from astrology in that its origin was a game, and it's, you talk about a 200-year cycle. The divinatory uses of the tarot really are only just a little more than 200 years old, as opposed to astrology, which would be 10 times that. So yes. I thought today I'd embrace the play, and I'm going to play a little bit with the tarot numerologically. April is the 4th month of the calendar year. So numerologically, it actually aligns with the Emperor in the tarot. Now, it's an interesting alignment because the Emperor also aligns with Aries, which makes up almost 3 weeks of the month of April as well. And the Emperor, and this is the card here, and I'm going to show it to you from the Rider-Waite deck, but I have another version that I'd like to share as well. The Emperor really is a card of authority and structure, but I'm really drawn to the card that's analogous to the Emperor in another deck, actually one of my favorite decks. And Kelly, you would know this deck quite well, Joanna Powell Colbert's Gaian Tarot deck.
Beautiful deck.
It's a gorgeous deck. It's one that someone gifted to me, interestingly enough, in 2010. And her deck, the cards are quite large. The Emperor in this deck is actually called the Builder. It's a much less authoritarian card. It's a more sustainable leader. I always think of it as a leader that leads. So whereas the Emperor would be that card, where somebody lords over their dominion, the Builder is a card where somebody looks at ways that they can both lead internally and look at ways they can disseminate their authority to raise others to also lead. So, the energy around that month of April, that Emperor energy, is really about kind of creating the structures, whether they're within yourself or whether they're, external, whether they're outside, that both allow you to lead and that also those support other people in those in those spaces of leadership. So, from the tarot's perspective, look for those opportunities to lift others up with your own leadership. So that's the tarot from a major arcana perspective. I did say I was going to play, so I'm going to sit in April for a little bit. I'm also going to play with the minor arcanas, which I didn't do the last time. So as well, you would know, and maybe many, people who are watching your YouTube channel, of course, every astrological sign is divided up into 3 parts with degrees. So 3 decans, 0 to 10 degrees, 10 or 0 to 9, 59. Anyways, first 10, middle 10, third 10. And what the tarot has done is the tarot actually has an association of a minor arcana card for each of the 36 decans in the zodiac. And it starts out, it groups them in 3s. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then links them based on the element of the sign. So as an example, 2, 3, 4 starts off the astrological year because we start, those are the first 3 numbers, and we start with Aries, which is a fire sign. The suit associated with fire in the tarot are the wands. So the 2, 3, and 4 of wands are the cards associated with Aries. 2 being Aries 1, the first decan, 3 being Aries 2, and the 4 of wands being Aries 3. And I looked at the 3 cards and I thought, I want to highlight one card from each of the decans of the month, just for play, and thinking of the card that kind of links to the Emperor energy. I thought of the 3 of wands. And the 3 of wands, and I'm going to hold it up here, is the card of Aries 2. So it's the card of the kind of first, it's the middle 10 degrees, but it's probably the first 9 or 10 days of Aries.
April?
Of April, sorry.
Yeah,
of April.
the middle decan of Aries, which
middle decan of Aries
to the early part of April calendar-wise.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, Aries 2, start of April by calendar. So it's a card about taking stock, and where I think the energy, when I think of the energy of this card, I think about our renovation, where you've got an idea that you're looking for. It's like looking at a project planner. So it asks the questions, where are we? What is our plan for this? So it's not a card of work, but it's a card of taking stock. So we have an idea. And we want to find out exactly where we are in this idea and what is the work that we're planning to do, even though we may not have done an awful lot of it yet. So for that first week and a half of April, take a look at a project or a task or even an idea that you have that is either at or kind of near the initial stages, and take stock of where you are. Review your plan, review your map to make sure that you're going where you really want to go. I think of Stephen Covey, I think, had an idea in his book where he's like, having a map of New York City is no good if you're traveling around Chicago. So the idea that you want to make sure that you know where you're going and that your plan links to where you're going. So when we think about those 2 energies for April, we have that builder emperor energy, the idea of taking lead. And then I focused on that 3 of wands energy, that idea of taking stock. So that's where we're sitting kind of with the tarot for the month of April. Did you, we'll look at you for the astrology for the month of April.
Yeah, and it's a bit tricky. April and May of 2023, it is tricky to narrow it down to kind of one thing astrologically. So I'm going to do my best. So first off, one of the things that stands out that I know is always helpful for people to hear about is that we will have a Mercury retrograde in April. So April 21st, Mercury will station retrograde in the sign of Taurus. And so the latter part of April and the early part of May, we're in that review, rethink, revise, redo zone of Mercury retrograde, which is interesting with what you were talking about, Peter, in terms of the planning and the preparation. It's sort of, Mercury retrograde is always about, we've done some things or we've set out on a particular path, and then we might hit a little bit of a delay or a block of some kind, and it prompts a reevaluation or that questioning process of, should I still be doing this thing? Or is it important to still go in this direction? have events or circumstances changed? Is there missing information that I might need to wait for before I can revise the goal, the intentions, and then perhaps move forward with an updated strategy? And what's really interesting about the Mercury retrograde in April, it's happening in the sign of Taurus. Mercury moves into Taurus very early in April and will be in Taurus for most of April, all of May, and the early part of June. And this is just the start in a series of kind of important shifts of planets coming into the sign of Taurus. And April, in some ways, is a little bit of a preparation month for a major move that happens in May, which is asking us to kind of get ready for a next stage of growth or expansion. And so that Mercury retrograde, I think, in April is a little bit more significant than a typical Mercury retrograde. Of course, those of you who are longtime astrology fans will know we have Mercury retrograde 3, sometimes 4 times a year. But this one happening in the zodiac sign of Taurus is almost asking for a reorganization or a rethink about a zodiac sign and a part of our chart and our lives that is ready for it's coming up to a major growth stage. And so this rethinking can be like a preparation for the growth that's coming next. So that's what I think is worth kind of keeping in mind for April. Of course, we do start eclipse season in the latter part of April. So crossing from April into May, we're also dealing with eclipse energy. And that always makes things, makes foundations a little bit less solid and stable, as if there are more possibilities than we thought, because not everything is as quite set in stone as we had expected. So there's a lot of questioning that I see astrologically is once we get into the second half of April. Yeah.
And you mentioned, you mentioned Taurus and the Mercury retrograde as well in Taurus. And when I take a look at May, the card for May, so that I've selected, which is month 5, and is also the 5th card of the major arcana, is the Hierophant card, which is also astrologically, it's linked to Taurus. So that's
interesting.
Again, it is interesting.
Well, and this is just like, I feel like we should just almost roll into May at this point. So because, and there is, I mean, it's just like the late April, last 10 days of April, first 3 weeks of May, every year is Taurus season with the sun in Taurus. But this year we've got the extra long cycle of Mercury in Taurus, and we do have Jupiter coming into Taurus in May, which is sort of the big note. But what do you want to, what can we, how can we connect with the energy of the card of the Hierophant as we get into May?
Well, so the Hierophant card is, and sometimes known as the teacher card, but it really is a card. Now it's interesting because the traditional card has all kinds of religious iconography. So, and again, I like holding the card up. People can Google Rider-Waite-Smith for any of the cards that are there. But with the Hierophant, you can see the Pope-like figure. You can see the monks that are at his feet. You can see even the tonsures that are, on their head. You can see the bishop's staff. You can see the crosses that the card really does, it highlights a real religious iconography, but the card itself really is about a card of higher teaching and learning in a structured, almost orthodox sort of way. You had mentioned that idea of higher teaching, and higher learning, and I always think of Jupiter. Funny that you mentioned that, although the card isn't linked to that. You had mentioned that that idea of the month of May, and I always think that from this perspective, May is a really good opportunity to look for the acquisition of higher knowledge. So that energy around the Hierophant is, whether you were meant to find the teacher or whether you were meant to be the teacher, May could be the month where this kind of Hierophant-like learning comes to fruition. So that idea of a deep dive into some kind of spiritual learning. So that's kind of the major arcana energy for May. And then when I looked at the minor arcana, actually looked at the 3rd decan of Taurus, so the 7 of Pentacles, and I actually selected this card because it almost looks like a next stage after the 3 of Wands. So the 3 of Wands, we had that idea of, looking at a project, in its initial plans. And you can see with this card, this is actually, we've done some work here. So we have the person who's looking at the work that they've done. And although they're taking stock, they're not taking stock of what they have or what they're planning to do. They're actually taking stock of what they've already done. So whereas when we had that, first 10 days of April to look at, well, we have a project and what are we going to do? Those last 10 days of Taurus, so that mid-month of May is a great time to stop and say, well, what have we done? Let's take a look now. Let's look back. Let's reflect on the work that we've done. So interesting, some of the themes that come out between both.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And you had mentioned the builder archetype earlier for the Emperor equivalent card in the Joanna Powell Colbert deck.
Yeah, the Gaian deck. Yeah,
the Gaian Tarot. Yeah,
the Gaian Tarot.
And that archetype of the builder or the farmer is something that I always think about with the zodiac sign of Taurus. And, the big astrological news for the month of May is Jupiter coming into the sign of Taurus for the first time in 12 years. So starting May 16, we're going to have Jupiter finishing up its tour through Aries and settling into this earthy, grounded, embodied sign. And what's interesting with Jupiter's orbit is that it gets a little higgledy-piggledy when Jupiter goes through the signs of Aries and Pisces. So for the last 18 months, we've had Jupiter just spending a few months in one sign and then back in another and then in the other. So we've had a little bit of a broken or erratic quality to Jupiter's cycle, which is not typically part of Jupiter's cycle. And Jupiter also spends less time in the zodiac sign of Pisces than it does for other zodiac signs. And so Jupiter's been in Pisces, in and out of Pisces and Aries. We're just wrapping up Jupiter in Aries. And mid-May, we get into this kind of uber Taurus cycle with Jupiter coming into Taurus. And Jupiter is going to kind of settle into Taurus. It ingresses into Taurus just once and will spend 12 months without changing signs. So there is something about, the qualities of Taurus are about grounding. And I think it's reflected in the cycle this year in that Jupiter is saying, I'm just doing this one thing for the next 12 months. I want to embody this thing. I want to gain wisdom through this particular thing. And the thing will be different for each of us, depending on where you have the zodiac sign of Taurus in your personal birth chart. So if you think about the house that has Taurus in it for you, you are looking to gain new wisdom and understanding in that part of your life. And based on that wisdom, you're looking to make some progress around long-term growth, long-term accumulation, long-term expansion goals. And so Jupiter in Taurus, there are themes of accumulation here, of building and growing tangibly. And that can be, for some of us, it might be, I've just become, I'm shopping a lot or I'm buying lots of things. And obviously that's not the ideal expression of Jupiter in Taurus, but you could be accumulating financial security, or you could be accumulating specific tools that will help you with some of your goals, help you build towards achievement. But one thing, and this has sort of occurred to me as you were talking and sharing some of the tarot insights, Taurus is a sign ruled by Venus. So it holds the wisdom of pleasure. And it also, being an earth sign, holds the wisdom of the body and the wisdom of nature. And so with Jupiter in Taurus, connecting with pleasure, with nature, with the body, in ways that remind us that we are embodied, that we're not just, an intellectual creature with lots of ideas and, connected to a million people online, that we have a physical body that requires physical care, that we have a natural environment that we can benefit from being in relationship with. And because Jupiter is the sign that it's the earth sign ruled by Venus, it is about the pleasures that evoke the sensory delight. So it's the pleasure of taste and touch and sounds and sights. And so looking over this next 12 months to add more pleasurable moments or little luxuries into your life, which might be, having some really beautiful fragrant flowers. It might be making more of an effort to cook your food or to walk in a green park more often. And so that's a really significant shift. The first part of 2023, we've had Jupiter in Aries, which is ruled by Mars. There's a bit of an aggressive, but also a very fast-paced quality tone to that. Jupiter in Taurus is much slower. And so that idea of slowing down, pause, reflect, reassess, it's like the planning before the doing is also part of Jupiter and Taurus. And clearly I'm very excited about this cycle. I think it has a lot of really nourishing, calming things to offer, and I could talk about it for days, but hopefully that's given people a few ideas about how to connect with that. And it starts mid-May, so not too long now.
I'm really, it's again, I'm amazed by the almost the juxtaposition of some of the themes, because you talk about the idea of groundedness, and I think every card that's been selected so far has an element of groundedness, like that. The Seven of Pentacles, you mentioned the farmer. It's literally a farmer standing there, looking at their field. And you had talked about at Venus, and although, because I'm always surprised with the tarot, and for me that most of the time we're talking about now April, May, and most of June we're talking about at least spring in the northern hemisphere. And although there's no association to it astrologically for me, and I've written about it, I blogged about it, the link to the Empress card and that idea of abundance, and that is Venus personified. The Empress has all kinds of Venus symbols on the card and really has that Venus like sort of energy. So I just I'll always take an opportunity to throw the Empress out there. Even
yes, I mean, it is the image of the Empress card in the Rider-Waite deck is a very Venusian image. It is sort of that earth wisdom, that earth luxury, and it's not luxury.
I'll hold it up because I had it.
Yeah, perfect. It's not luxury in sort of that crazy 21st century financial sense of like having all the money. It's the luxury of contentment, of being satisfied with what one has, of knowing that your needs are met comfortably, that there are some pleasures and delights. But I also think, in what we're really talking about when we're touching astrologically, at least on Jupiter and Taurus, we are talking about a combination of benefic planets. Jupiter is the greater benefic, Venus is the lesser benefic. And one of the things that marks the benefic planets, at least in ancient styles of astrology, is that they are planets of moderation, that things are balanced, that we have one or two pieces of delicious chocolate, but we didn't gorge ourselves on a bowl of ice cream to make ourselves sick. It's sort of appropriate delights without them becoming excessive or, going over the top with them. So that Rider-Waite card of the Venus in Taurus, like when we say, accumulation or luxury, it is the satisfaction of enough without the worry of lack, if you like, and without going into excess territory. Anyway, so many juicy ideas here. And there is a lot to say about the astrology of May particularly. And so for those of you who are thinking, oh my gosh, I want even more, I'll just do a quick little plug for my monthly astrology guide membership, where I'll be talking about all the aspects that are happening in May and how that links to the longer Pluto in Aquarius cycle and things like that. But at this point, I think we're going to move on to June.
To June?
Yeah. Yes. And Peter, you'll give us a tarot tip or a tarot insight for June.
Yeah, June, I was absolutely influenced by, by the coming of summer in the Northern Hemisphere. I know as we're recording this, you're enjoying basically summer-like weather right now.
Oh yes, I'm in Sydney as we're recording this. So this is hairstyled by humidity at the moment because it is very, very hot and muggy here.
Yeah, at this stage, I don't have the luxury of summer. So the two cards actually that I've selected are very, very summer-like cards. So the first one is it's the card that would be associated with Gemini, which astrologically would take up almost 2/3. That's right, most of June. But it's also card number 6 in the major arcana, and it is the Lover's card. So it's interesting because when I think people look at this card, they think right away of the name, and they think right away it's about either romantic, sensual or sexual love. And I think there are some readers who would use it that way. And I think if I was working with a client and they were asking a question about romance and the Lovers came up, I think that's certainly a good omen towards, towards kind of love as the card of the Lovers. But traditionally, it's actually a card that links much more to kind of the Gemini energy, and that's that idea of partnership, duality, and choice. So, if it's a romantic choice that we're contemplating, then the Lover's there to kind of remind us that the choice, we really need to be true to ourselves in our choice. That, it's the Lover really highlights those questions. What do I really want? And then if it was romantic, it would be, well, who do I want to want this with? It reminds me actually, like a little bit of, find thyself first before, kind of reaching out and making those connections with others. So this can be any kind of partnership. So that the June with the Lovers card, a great opportunity for partnership, whether it's romantic, whether it's friendship, whether it's business, but it is that idea of making true to self choices with partnership. So, to me, I always think from a romantic perspective, that really does speak an awful lot of that coming of summer, as we, especially here in Canada, as we, literally shed our skin, our big,
our 25,000 layers of clothing.
That's right. Exactly. Off comes the scarf, off comes the hat, off comes our jacket. We literally, kind of shed our skin and, and kind of put ourselves out there. Play for the minor arcana. I kind of stuck to the theme of the Lovers and went with what I would call kind of the Lovers light, and which really is one of my favorite cards in the minor arcana. I think at one point in time there was discussion about a tattoo of this card, and it's the card that actually covers Cancer 1. So when we talked again, just to go back, so 2, 3, 4 Aries, 5, 6, 7 Taurus, 8, 9, 10 Gemini, we go back to 2, 3, 4 for Cancer, but now because we're in a water sign, it's the 2, 3, 4 of Cups. So the card associated with Cancer 1 is the 2 of Cups. Now, this is a card of love and relationship because we are in the sign of waters. It really is. I mean, 2s are about balance, about duality, about attraction, about reflection. But this one really is about those things to the heart. So it's about balance of the heart. It's about duality of the heart. It's about offering our heart, to something or someone else. It's about, that dual attraction. So, if I take a look at the 2 of Cups and look at that latter part of June, then that latter part of June is a great time for either outward or inward affection and attraction. So, that's why I grabbed the 2 of Cups, which I'll say again, I think is one of my favorite cards in the entire minor arcana. So how about June from an astrological perspective?
Well, and I have to actually, I'm going to say something, Ram. So Peter and I did not collaborate on what we would discuss beforehand. Peter just picks the tarot bits, I pick the astrology bits, and then we just hit record and we just let it be creative.
We're also
on the
at this point, we're 18,000 kilometers apart too, so collaborating is a little difficult, right?
Yes. So the planet that I want to talk about as we get into June is Venus. Obviously the primary planet to do with relationships, but also pleasure and self-love is something that I really see attached a lot to Venus, like self-love, self-worth. Similarly with, I imagine, the Lovers card in the tarot, people often hear Venus and think romantic relationships, which is a component of what Venus covers, but it's not the only thing. It's not she has a little more in her purview than just romantic relationships. Because, your ability to enjoy a kind of balanced, stable, romantic relationship really comes down to the loving kindness that you show yourself initially. And the reason I wanted to talk about Venus as we head into June is that on June 5th, Venus is going to move into the zodiac sign of Leo, where unusually she will spend a little over 4 months. So we will have a Venus retrograde in the middle of 2023. That'll be something that's actually taking place in July, August of 2023. So Venus doesn't go retrograde yet, but she's moving into the place from which she will begin the retrograde. And so, most of June, all of July, all of August, all of September, and the early part of October, Venus is just hanging out in Leo. Now, so there's a few pieces here. normally Venus spends about 4 weeks in a zodiac sign. So to have her spend 4 months in a zodiac sign brings a huge emphasis on that planet sign combination. Plus, of course, we'll have the retrograde cycle. So Venus in Leo in June is, I always think of Venus in Leo as like a quality control or setting standards when it comes to love, relationships, and in general, interpersonal relations. So, I guess a little bit like the Lover's card in the tarot, Venus describes how we connect and interact with other people, whether that's with a family member or a close friend or somebody at work. And Venus in Leo is asking for this sort of equal sense of respect and acknowledgement. I think of Venus in Leo in a very regal way. It is a feminine placement, so I would think of more of like a queen type energy. And I think of that, which is accessible to everyone, the idea of, I have a standard, I know that I'm worth that standard, and I'm going to hold firm and true to that standard. So of being treated, that standard of, interaction, being respected. So there's something here about Venus coming into Leo that might have us all questioning the things that we tolerate and the things that we realize maybe aren't, contributing to a self-loving kind of state, because we're not seeing that respect reflected back in some of our interactions. Venus in Leo is also incredibly loyal. This is a very warm, expressive, and I think at times even very affectionate Venus placement. And so it is about, fire signs are more active and expressive than water signs, for instance. So Venus will spend a few weeks in Cancer before she settles into Leo. That'll be, a good part of May and the very early part of June. So once Venus comes into Leo, it is about looking to express or to show or to demonstrate the feelings of affection that you have. So whether it's an expression of gratitude to a friend, or appreciation to a mentor or someone at work, or a show of loyalty, just, by being there when it counts to a family member or someone else in your circle, there is an active component to loving and relating with Venus in Leo. So I just want to review my notes. The standards of quality, but also pleasure. If you're going to have a few scoops of ice cream or some chocolate, you want it to be the best quality that you can afford. Venus in Leo is not, she doesn't want, the junk, if you like. I also think about standards and quality control, not just in relationships with Venus and Leo, but also in terms of our entertainment and our leisure and relaxation activities, which are tied to Venus as well. So things like watching a really interesting or engaging movie rather than watching 5 episodes of some show that you've already seen before, for instance. I know that, I'm guilty of that, but I'm really trying to focus on that quality of enjoyment, and that can be enhanced by the quality of what it is you choose to engage with, or how you allow yourself to be entertained, if you like. So that's a little bit about Venus in Leo, which is part of the mix of June, but I wanted to mention it may not be the strongest thing in June, but because it's setting us up for this 4-month period, it's like the summer of Leo, if you like, in the Northern Hemisphere with Venus in Leo. We're going to be exploring all of those kind of quality control themes to do with enjoyment and interpersonal interactions over the time that Venus makes her way, sort of through her retrograde loop in Leo and then out of that zodiac sign. So that's something to think about for June astrologically. And it's so interesting that it really correlates with some of the cards that you picked up from the tarot.
Yeah. So maybe next time we should coordinate and.
Oh yes, I would like to. Yes. Well, I don't know. I love the fun of things of that. Too. Yeah, of the spontaneity.
Yeah. Well, and it's seeing
the sparks.
What
yeah,
correct.
Which is very Venus in Leo too, like the sparks. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I think that covers so one little summary piece astrologically is this quarter of the year, April, May, June, we do see a lot of the fixed zodiac signs coming into focus. We've got Pluto in Aquarius, just it is sort of technically in the background, but there are moments where other planets will interact with Pluto in Aquarius that will really make it sort of known. And then we've got the Jupiter into Taurus, we've got the Mercury retrograde in Taurus, and then we have the Venus coming into Leo. So the fixed signs are really emphasized, they're going to be active. And I think we all have a lot to learn about that relationship between stability and kind of continuity versus making changes, but making the changes in a thoughtful, prepared way rather than in a reactive way. So, okay. Any final thoughts from you, Peter, for this second quarter of 2023?
No, just the one piece that I didn't talk about with the minor arcana were the aces, and the aces are actually linked seasonally. So since spring in the Northern Hemisphere is going to be most of, and the correspondences come from esoteric groups that would have worked in likely Northern Europe and the UK. So they are linked to the Northern Hemisphere. It's the Ace of Pentacles. So it's very much an Earth-like energy that covers the entire springtime. So that idea of aces are always, the language I always use about an ace is a seed. So when we talk about the energy of the ace, it really is that planting into the earth. So the tarot has that, that energy that encompasses all of spring, that's shown in the Ace of Pentacles, that kind of overlays all of the other cards in the minor arcana. That's all I'll say from a global perspective for the time frame that we're covering.
Okay, fantastic. And Peter, where can people find out more about your offerings and services?
I'm always available at my website. So that's Peter White, WHITE tarot.com. You can read my blog posts. I have one that's upcoming. I actually have several upcoming, really focusing on the Decan walk that I'm looking at doing, one per Decan. So they'll be coming up. And then consultations always available, depending on when you're seeing this. The early part of spring, I'll have times available being in Sydney. So I'll have times available there. And then in April, moving forward, again, back in the Eastern time zone, but, always available online for consultations, and happy to see clients through tarot work as well. So that's what I've got going on right now.
Fantastic. And for any of you who are interested in more of the astrology of each week, if you're looking for a detail on every aspect, all the eclipse info, the big defining astrological events of the next few months, you can sign up for my monthly astrology guide membership, where I cover every aspect, give you all the info that you need to help time your life with astrology. So that's it from us for this quarter. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know any comments or reflections that you're working through in the comments section below. Please be sure to like this video here on YouTube, and even subscribe to my channel so you can get notification of our future videos. And we will see you back in the middle of the year for our next quarterly focus. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.